From NBC News, this is Decision 2024. Here are Hallie Jackson and Tom Llamas.
Hey everyone, welcome to NBC News Special Report. We're now less than 2 hours away from the first polls closing, and we've got breaking news. Our first look at exit poll data. I'm Tom Llamas.
And I'm Hallie Jackson. And listen, this is our first look at some of the numbers on who's voting and what matters, even as some folks out there are still in polling lines in every state across the country.
Yeah, and as soon as we get that exit poll data, again, it's going to come in at any moment. We're going to bring this to you live. And again, this is our first check-in with the voters across America, how the electorate is thinking about this election and what's most important to them.
Remember, all of it is coming as we are seeing huge turnout numbers. And Tom, some 79 million people at least have voted early, either in person or in the mail. You also look at a place like Michigan, one of those 7 key battlegrounds that I know you'll be watching in that big board tonight, where the Secretary of State there says they are on pace to set records. A lot of people want to have their voices heard.
Yeah, we should set the table on these exit polls too, right, Hallie? So
please.
Exit poll data coming from 10 states. Hallie mentioned those 7 battlegrounds that we're watching: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia. Then we go out west, Arizona, Nevada, plus 3 more. Texas. We're also going to be looking at Ohio as well and see what else we get from the exit poll data.
That's right. And Florida, 600 polling sites all across the country. And we want to be clear here. This includes not just day of exit polling, but it also includes in-person early voting. It includes mail-in ballot voting as well. So that is how you kind of get a sense of the landscape. I have to give you a grain of salt, a bit of a caveat. These numbers could change a little bit. They come in several different waves that are called in throughout the course of the evening. So right now at 5 o'clock, it is 5:02 East Coast time. That is when wave 1 is set to come in.
Yeah, and we won't lie to you. We're tap dancing here because usually we have these exit poll data in by now. And again, it's going to be the first batch. Chuck Todd joins us, chief political analyst here at NBC News. Chuck, look, it's the big issues, right? It's the economy, the state of democracy, abortion. Right. What do you think we're going to see at the top?
Well, look, I am very curious. If economy's not at the top, that's a tell. Right off the bat. And there's been a question. Is this a micro election or a macro election, right? What do I mean by that? We've been talking about a lot of specific issues. You and I have spent a lot of time this year talking about inflation and the importance of that. And there's no doubt it's been a real drag on President Biden's job rating. It's been sort of the wind at President Trump's sails. But if it's not the top issue, that means there's something else that they went into that voting booth. And, look, state of democracy you got to be careful here because it's a subjective, I think.
Well,
it's
cuts both ways.
It can cut both ways.
It's the Democrats and Republicans both have different visions of what that means to them.
I really want to see the gender gap on that.
Well, guess what?
Because that, to me, will be whether that is a tell. Yeah. If you've got a massive gender gap on state of the democracy, and it is something that more women are picking than men, and when we see the top issues by gender, that's going to tell us a lot about this election.
You know, Chuck, we already have one tell, and that's the early voting data. Right. Record-breaking across all the battleground states, something we've never seen before, but we're also seeing an uptick between both parties, right? So it's tough to say, what is that going to show us?
Look, we've seen this polling, right? If you are a regular voter, the more regular you are in voting, the more likely you support Harris. If you don't vote in every election, and the less frequently you vote, the more likely you're a voter for Trump. So the higher the turnout, that actually might benefit Trump more than it benefits Harris, even though traditionally, and this has all been since the Trump era, Trump does a good job at getting sort of non-traditional voters to the polls. It's why we've seen his party do so poorly when his name is not on the ballot.
There's 2 storylines that I'm looking at here, and you've mentioned both of them obliquely here, Chuck. One is this issue we're talking about, these low propensity voters. Right. And in my conversation with Trump campaign officials and advisors, just even in the last few hours here, they're feeling pretty good about getting those low propensity voters. In plain English, all that means is people who don't tend to vote a ton.
Don't typically vote.
They feel good about getting them out. The other big thing, of course, is the gender gap. And I want to say we finally do have these numbers in now on the most important issue. Look at that in bright pink there. 36% of voters say the most important issue to them is the state of democracy, not the economy as the top issue. That is right there at number 2 at 30%, the economy. Abortion, 14%, followed by immigration. Chuck?
Immigration's where? Think about it. Just take a step back here, okay? Look at those top 4 issues again. We know what the number 1 and number 2 issues have been for Donald Trump this election season.
The economy and immigration.
Correct. Add that together. Okay? Add up together state of democracy and abortion. It says I'm being a little simplistic here, but already, if this, and again, one of the things that I want to warn people is that there has been a tradition in these exit polls.
I was just going to say, you're doing it. That's right.
The first wave skews a little left.
And sometimes the top issue can become the second top issue.
And it has happened to us in previous elections.
Right.
So we absolutely want to, this is a little grains of salt we want to give you
That's
here.
right. We're not overreading into it, but we do want to tell you what we know as we're
directionally, if this is what this electorate is saying, you would be, and the Harris campaign will be ecstatic that that's the direction right now of where things are at.
So we have another exit poll we want to go to right now. Who do you trust more to handle the economy? 51% Donald Trump and 4% behind Kamala Harris. This is not surprising. Trump closed on the economy. He also closed on immigration. Chuck, your take on this?
But you know, it is a little surprising.
I think the gap.
Exactly.
It's a very narrow gap.
Should be farther, right?
Yeah, Donald Trump had been leading on this pretty heavily.
8 to 12 points in many of when we would say who'd be better for the economy. She didn't have to win this issue. She just couldn't get clobbered on this issue. Again,
early data.
That's right.
Early data.
But wow, that's not an insignificant tool.
And again, this is the first data we're getting, so we're obviously going to be talking about it for a while.
Together.
Do you know who else is interested in this data, right? Not just us, not just voters, the campaigns. They love to know where this early data is coming in, what it means, and what it says about the electorate, what trends we can draw more broadly from some of the numbers that we're seeing here.
We have another exit poll that's just in. This is who do you trust more to handle the issue of abortion? Let's take a look at that. I think we have that one in.
We don't yet.
We're actually working on that one. Okay, we're still working. It's about to come, and as soon as it is, we will bring it to you live.
I have to tell you, we're seeing this at the same time that you're seeing this. Yeah. It's loading into the system. We're bringing it up the second that we have it. But I want to bring in Christine Romans, who's with us here in the studio, as we talk about that gap on the economy here and where it stands. Listen, it is one of the most important issues to voters, right? We know that based on these early numbers now. You and I have been talking for months about the disconnect for some voters between the actual numbers in the economy, inflation, the lowest it's been in several years, the unemployment rate at just over 4%, and yet people don't necessarily feel great about it.
Yeah, these top-line economic numbers that are so strong and robust for the American economy, but when you ask voters how they consistently feel like higher prices is something that's holding their family back. And it's not just inflation. You know, I've been going to a lot of battleground states. They're concerned about the cost of elder care, about child care, about housing. They're concerned about wages, especially in states like Nevada. So there are a lot of different things at play here for when you ask people how they feel about the economy, what exactly is their beef overall. We do know that in 2016, when voters said that they felt bad about the economy, they voted more for Donald Trump than for Hillary Clinton. And you go to 2020, when you ask people how they felt about the economy, if they felt bad about the economy, they were more likely to vote for Joe Biden. So the person who was not the incumbent, essentially. So what that means for tonight, who knows? There are all these other factors. I will say one thing, Hallie, and you and I have talked about this a lot. Voters say they feel lousy about the economy, but they keep spending. Voters say they feel lousy about the economy, but they're
planning vacations.
Absolutely. Yeah. So they do have household finances in general are better today than many thought they would be 4 years after the pandemic. Also, even in these exit polls, I can't wait to see them when they come out because we asked about inflation. You know, you think about 4 years ago, that question wasn't even on these exit polls. We were asking people how they feel about lockdowns, how they feel about public health, how they feel about the state of their own health. So just a reminder that a lot has changed over the past 4 years. The American voter has gone through an awful lot.
Christine Roman is going to ask you to stand by for a second, but Tom, we have more news.
Yeah, we got some more breaking news. We have that exit poll we had just mentioned earlier. Who do you trust more to handle the issue of abortion? 50% for Harris here, Trump 44%. We've just gotten an additional note that more Trump voters today wanted abortion to be legal than they did 4 years ago, which is also sort of a stunning stat for those Trump voters because it sort of cuts against the grain from what they were before. Also kind of explains why we've been seeing this consistent gap between Donald Trump and those Republican Senate candidates on this issue. I've had a lot of, I think Donald Trump successfully muddied his position, but he didn't help his party. And it's going to be interesting to see that. I do think there are essentially abortion rights supporters who are Trump supporters who may be voting Trump and Democrat down the ballot. Yeah, I was going to say, Chuck, we talked about this all year, you know, because the news moves so fast. Would abortion still be top of mind for voters? And it could be tonight.
And I will tell you that just, again, off the phone with a source in the know on the Senate side, look at that in places like Florida, Chuck, right?
Yeah,
exactly that point.
There's sort of two things that Republican strategists are worried about with one is the issue itself, split ticket. The other issue, of course, is the Trump voter that just shows up, votes Trump and leaves and forgets to vote.
So trust on immigration is obviously an issue that former President Trump closed on. You just saw those trust numbers there. I'll ask our control room to pull that back up because we also have, Chuck, something I know you're interested in, which is the gender gap, the breakdown between men and women when it comes to these top issues. Remember why this matters. We are on track potentially to have the biggest gender gap we've ever seen, right, in modern presidential politics in at least the last several cycles, with women plus 16 for Kamala Harris, men plus 18 for former President Trump, meaning more men back him, more women back her.
I'd be surprised if it ends up that big of a gap. If it's over 30, we've never had that. But it is interesting. You sort of
this is a little odd, though.
But you see how it does sort itself.
Yeah.
It's a little odd at the top there. But if you look at it, right, men essentially are picking economy and immigration more than women are. And women are picking clearly with abortion rights. That's a 2-to-1 margin there. The state of the democracy, this is proof that this is eye of the beholder stuff. And it may be.
Yeah, and explain that.
Maybe, look, there's just as many people in MAGA world who think this is an exit, that think that the Democrats and the elites and we in the mainstream media are part of this existential threat. I think a better umbrella for this issue is sort of, this is the cultural divide in America, right? And we have not come up with a great way of doing it. And I think this is, if you believe this is a macro way of life election, that my way of life is going to be put at risk if the other party wins, this is likely the issue you're picking, which is why I think it's a very difficult one for us to break down, because I do think every voter looks at it slightly different.
You think about Vice President Harris, her closing message largely focused on democracy. It largely focused on abortion access. Democrats see that as very mobilizing up and down the ticket for Democrats. Former President Trump closed on the issue of immigration. This has been something he's been talking about since, Tom, you remember covering that. He came down that golden escalator, now back almost 10 years ago. I want to pull back up that board we had up, that picture, essentially, of trust on immigration. I'm going to ask our control room to do that now, because it wouldn't be surprising to see former President Trump leading on that issue, as we're taking another look here at the gender gap piece of it. Again, split between men and women. And I got to tell you, Tom and Chuck, as we're sitting here, I know we said it 11 minutes ago. Let me just remind folks, these numbers could change a little bit, right? They could shift here. And here's trust on immigration. And there, unsurprising to see former President Trump with that lead there.
Yeah, still, again, but I'm looking at the margins here. I mean, it's not a blowout here when it comes to immigration. As we were talking, Hallie, I kept looking over at Christine Romans, and I'd like to get to Christine Romans right now because she has a lot of data on the U.S. economy, and it's sort of fascinating, right, Christine? Christine, walk us through what we see there and what you're seeing in these exit polls.
I know Tom sees me geeking out over here.
No, it's fascinating.
I love it. It really is. So the condition of the U.S. economy, and remember, these are people who actually voted. I think it's really important to make that distinction again. We've been asking people in opinion polls for 2 years now about how they feel. These are people who actually voted. So this is the clearest view of how people are feeling in the voting booth or when they're filling out their mail-in ballot. So not so good to poor. Look at that number, 67% there. That's a big number. That's the biggest number we've seen in terms of poor and not so good in the last 3 or 4 cycles here. Only 5% say excellent, which is pretty interesting. Only 28% say good when there are all of these top-line economic numbers that have been so consistently strong. But this is exactly what we've been hearing from people for so long. They just feel like the economy is not working for them, guys.
So, Christine, no surprise there. You're at about 67%, right? People thinking the economy is not that great. But you're saying that tracks with what we've seen all year. What else have we learned?
Well, we've learned also family finances compared to 4 years ago. Think about 4 years ago what was happening. People were voting in masks, or they were trying to figure out how to social distance. This broadcast was very different 4 years ago than it is today because we were in the middle of a coronavirus pandemic. So people honestly, every 4 years, always ask how they're feeling. But when you look about 30% say their family finances are about the same, a quarter are better, 45 worse today. So this is one of those things that's really been top of mind for people, especially because inflation has just been this grinding problem for so long.
And do we have data on inflation? I thought we did. Okay.
Yeah, we do have an inflation number. In the last year, has inflation caused you and your family a severe hardship, no hardship, or a moderate hardship? This is a big number here. People who feel it.
74,
that's a big percentage of people who are voting saying that inflation is something that is still top of mind in their family.
I would just tell you, having recently been in a couple of key battlegrounds in Pennsylvania and Erie County, in North Carolina, in New Hanover County, talking to people about this exact issue, inflation, you know what you hear about again and again? the cost of burger meat, the cost of milk and eggs, and the cost of a gallon of gas, right? Because even as these macro numbers, as we've talked about, are adjusting, people still feel like every time they go to the grocery store, they're spending a ton.
And that's almost more important, right, Christine? Because it's not the number, it's not the percentage of where inflation is, it's how they feel every single day.
Absolutely. And when you look at grocery prices, for example, they're up 22% compared with 4 years ago, but the wages are up 20%. Just looking at wages alone, you're like, that's great. 20% bigger paycheck than 4 years ago. When the grocery bill is 22% more, that is a reminder every week or every 10 days for families that things aren't the same as they were at the last time they were voting.
Christine, I'm going to let you get back to crunching the numbers. Chuck Todd next to us is already crunching more of the numbers. The campaigns are looking at this stuff, too. So I want to get to Peter Alexander and Garrett Haake, both of our correspondents covering both the Harris and the Trump campaigns. We're just getting in, Garrett and Peter, what we call unfaves. In other words, the favorability ratings for each of these candidates. And let's start with former President Trump. We're going to pull that up here. And you can see he is what they say underwater, essentially. 54% of voters in these early exit polls have an unfavorable opinion of the former president. Garrett, as you well know, though, the strategy for the Trump team has long been supercharge the base. Get that 44% who do see him favorably to actually show up and vote either today or during early voting.
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. And I remember a briefing with Trump campaign officials several months ago now in which they said by the time this race is over, both of these candidates will be unpopular. And that's broadly true. Kamala Harris underwater as well in these polls, but not quite as badly. And I think that's going to be part of the challenge for the Trump campaign as we look at these early exit polls, which I should caution that the campaign was telling us sort of all week not to overinterpret them. And I think that's a worthy acknowledgement to make here. But they also wanted to use President Biden as an anchor around Kamala Harris's neck and essentially hope that Biden's unfavorability would drag down Kamala Harris. And the delta between Biden being far more unpopular than Kamala Harris is right now is the kind of thing that I think would be a warning sign to the Trump campaign about that messaging not being as effective as they'd like.
Garrett Haake, thank you very much, live for us down there in South Florida. Appreciate it.
All right, let's move over to my friend Peter Alexander. And Peter, let's take a look at the favorability for the vice president. Here it is. This is the first time we're seeing this. What we have here, the opinion of Kamala Harris, unfavorable 50%. Favorable 48%, unfavorable 50%, favorable 48%. Her unfavorable slightly lower than what former President Trump's was. Peter, talk to me about how the Harris campaign is feeling. I know you've been reporting all day about sort of their momentum and sort of maybe a changing of mood. They were feeling a bit more positive today.
Yeah, not just positive today. They've been feeling increasingly confident over the course of the last several days. Let's look at that favorability number, though, for a moment. And Kamala Harris, she performs better than both Donald Trump and Joe Biden. 4 points ahead of Donald Trump, 7 points ahead of Joe Biden. One of the concerns about Donald Trump had been that there was some sort of an evaporation, a memory gap where Americans forgot the way they felt about Trump at the end of his term. Right now, his number's coming down. Her number is particularly high in their view right now and higher than the man with whom she served, Joe Biden. So that's something they're feeling, I think, good about this evening. One other data point we'll share. We just heard from a senior campaign advisor. They're seeing some new information coming out of Pennsylvania. Obviously, the crucial battleground, the biggest prize of the swing states with 19 electoral votes among Puerto Rican voters in the 3 wards with the largest Puerto Rican populations. As of midday today, the numbers were already at 79% of turnout in 2020, which is to say they believe Puerto Rican voters are turning up in big numbers, particularly notable as it comes only about a week and a half after those offensive comments by the comedian who led off for former President Trump at the Madison Square Garden event just a couple of weeks ago.
All right, Peter Alexander, for us, Peter, we appreciate all that.
I'm going to hear at the big board, Tom, because I want to talk through the road to 270, which is what you are going to be watching tonight.
This has been my best friend for the last 2 or 3 months here.
Sweet.
We've just gotten to know each other. Again, the road to 270. We're going to start tonight, election night, where we left off in 2020. Except those 7 battleground states you see here are not colored in. Remember, President Biden won 6 of those 7 battlegrounds. So let's talk about Kamala Harris and her easiest path. Her easiest path tonight, if she holds that blue wall, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Hallie, you see the electoral votes
That's
there?
Right.
270, that gets her right to the White House. But if she were to have a terrible night tonight and the blue wall were to collapse and Trump were to win all this, she has another path. Nevada, Arizona, hold Georgia, and flip North Carolina. She gets to 275 there. Again, if this is the night for Democrats, Hallie, as you know, they'd be having heart attacks all night, but she can still get there with that path.
Talk about, then, former President Trump's clearest and cleanest path to 270.
The easiest way to remember this, Hallie, for President Trump when you're watching election night tonight, if he kicks it East Coast style. Pennsylvania. He wins Pennsylvania, flips that, holds North Carolina, and flips Georgia back red. If he does this, look at his number, 270. He gets there. But if something were to happen and he doesn't win Pennsylvania, he has to win somewhere else in the Midwest. This is important. There is no Sun Belt strategy for President Trump. He has to win somewhere in the blue wall. He has to break through. If he can hold North Carolina, flip Georgia. If he wins Michigan, if he just picks off Nevada or Arizona, either one gets him there. Even the 6 in Nevada get him there. But if he can only win Wisconsin, he has to win in Arizona. He needs those 11 electoral votes to get to 270.
Let me ask you about a possibility that we're not anticipating necessarily, but that could happen. And that is, what if nobody gets to 270 and it's 269? It's a tie.
That can happen. So listen, let me give the blue wall to Vice President Harris, and you're going to say, Tom, are you crazy? She's at 270. I'm going to say, hold on. Yep. I'll give you all the Sun Belt states to President Trump. Remember, I told you he can't get there with that. He's at 268. So we come to Nebraska. Nebraska has that Where's Waldo effect right now on our map, and that's because Nebraska gives out their electoral votes by total vote, popular vote for the state, but also by congressional district. Maine does this as well. So there's 3 congressional districts. They each give one. CD2, that's a battleground district in Nebraska. That's Omaha. Trump won it in 2016. If he wins it again, look what happens. 269 to 269, Hallie. And you know what happens there? Do we go down that road?
We don't have to go all the way down the road, but we can say that road leads to Congress.
Yeah, Congress. The new Congress will essentially pick the president, the House, the Senate would pick the vice president.
You heard Tom lay out the importance of Pennsylvania. We're going to take you there when we come back, breaking down how voters all across the country feel about some of these key issues we've been talking about, like the democracy, immigration, abortion night. It is election night here on NBC News. We are back now with our special election coverage, Decision 2024, right here on NBC News. We are just over an hour now from the first battleground polls closing, and we've got that exit poll data coming in showing what is driving voters on some of these key issues. We asked this question: which one of these 5 issues matter most in deciding how you voted for president? You can see it there. State of democracy at 35%, the economy following, abortion access after that, followed by immigration and foreign policy.
Yeah, and an interesting note that Chuck Todd just brought up, that in the state of democracy, when you dig a little deeper into that exit poll, it actually splits almost 50-50. So essentially, whether you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, the way you look at this issue is different. And that doesn't tell us too much, but it's interesting that it's more important than the economy at this point.
Yeah, and again, these numbers are early. They could shift a little bit, but there's some other pieces to this as well, including on abortion.
Yeah, so let's take a look at abortion, which comes closest to your position on the issue of abortion. This is what we asked. Should it be legal in all cases, legal in most cases, legal in some cases? The first question was, who do you trust more to handle abortion? 50% for Kamala Harris, 44% for Trump. That's not a huge surprise. She was closing with abortion, traveling those battleground states with women, talking about the access to abortion.
Showed up in Texas, a state that has a very controversial abortion restriction law, not because Texas is necessarily a battleground they think they're going to flip, but to be able to have that stage for that issue. Of course, former President Trump closed largely on immigration.
Okay, let's go to Pennsylvania right now. It is the key maybe to all the battleground states, the Keystone State. Jacob Soboroff on the ground for us in Pennsylvania. Jacob, tell us exactly where you are and what you're seeing tonight.
We're at Temple University, Tom, at a polling place. It's got a 2-hour-long line. These folks have been waiting for 2 hours. I'm just going to make this short and sweet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different election machines over here. Let me split this line and tell you a little bit about what happened here. Earlier today, we reported how long the lines were. Well, the city of Philadelphia has showed up with 2 new election machines right now. These are going to get set up. The voters are going to be able to vote on them here. And hopefully those lines over there are going to go a little faster, guys.
Jacob Soboroff live for us there in Pennsylvania. Are we going to be saying the word Pennsylvania 150 times tonight?
I think we're going to be saying it all night, maybe into tomorrow. That is for sure. So the first battleground polls close in about 90 minutes. We're going to take you there live as the key states start voting and we get the results in.
Then we're going to see 7:30, of course, polls closing in North Carolina, Ohio, and many more throughout the evening. Stay with us. We've got special live coverage right here. Decision 2024 on NBC News.